They promised us eternity, a gift from the gods of technology whispered down from the silicon heavens. They just never told us that a gift, when it can't be returned, becomes a cage. They sold it as the final victory over our own biology, the end of fear, the last great human achievement, and we bought it. We bought it all. Now we just are. We exist, suspended in the amber of infinity, with nothing left to win, nothing left to lose, and no way out. Humanity had been warned, of course. The warnings were always there, tucked away in the dusty pages of old books, dismissed as morbid fantasies. Jonathan Swift tried to tell us, painting a portrait of his Struldbrugs, wretched immortals cursed to an eternity of decay, their endless years making them not wise, but objects of pity and disgust. Outcasts from the cycle of life they could no longer join. Jorge Luis Borges gave us a character so desperate to escape his unending existence that he searched the globe not for the fountain of youth, but for a mythical river that could give him back the simple, forgotten gift of death. We read these tales as cautionary fables, never as blueprints. We saw them as reflections of a primitive fear, a failure of imagination. We had a better idea. We were smarter. But the cold truth of the cosmos is that infinity devours all meaning. Every passion cools, every love becomes a memory of a memory, every masterpiece becomes banal wallpaper, every new discovery is just a rearrangement of the same old atoms you've been looking at for eons. The horror isn't in the dying. The horror is in the not being able to. So I ask you, from this perfect, sterile, inescapable paradise, what does one do on the trillionth Tuesday? When every book has been read, every song has been heard, and every star in the sky is just another tired old light you've seen a billion times before? This is the final prison. Not a prison of walls and bars, but of time itself. A prison built for the conscious mind from which there is, and never will be, any escape.
This prison may feel new, with its chrome finish and its digital ghosts, but its foundations are sunk deep into the bedrock of history. The desire that built these walls is not a modern invention. It is the oldest story we have ever told ourselves. To understand the cage, you have to understand the scream that echoed long before it was built, the primal scream against the dying of the light. It was first etched into clay tablets nearly 5,000 years ago in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Here was a king, 2/3 god, 1/3 man, who possessed everything a mortal could desire. But when his beloved friend Enkidu dies in his arms, the king is shattered. He is not broken by grief alone, but by the terrifying revelation of his own mortality. For the first time, Gilgamesh understands that he too will one day be nothing but dust. And so begins the first great quest in human literature. He journeys to the ends of the earth, through darkness and over the waters of death, all to find a single thorny plant at the bottom of the sea, a plant said to grant eternal life. He finds it. He holds the end of oblivion in his hands. But on his journey home, exhausted, he stops to bathe, and while his back is turned, a serpent slithers from the water, devours the plant, sheds its skin, and becomes young again. The lesson was brutal and clear. Immortality belongs to the cycles of nature, not to the grasping hands of man. Yet we never stopped grasping. The story simply changed its name. In the dusty, firelit laboratories of the Middle Ages, it became the Philosopher's Stone. Alchemists, shrouded in secrecy and esoteric symbols, spent their lives not just trying to turn lead into gold, but to distill the very essence of life, to create an elixir that could cheat the grave. Their quest was a spiritual one, a belief that matter, and therefore the body, could be perfected, purified, and made eternal. That same desperate hope sailed across oceans. It was called the Fountain of Youth, a legend that fueled the brutal age of exploration. Men like Ponce de Leon were not just mapping coastlines, they were chasing a rumor, a mirage of eternal life shimmering in the humid swamps of a new world. This dream of a personal paradise drove them to conquer a real one, proving that the hunt for immortality often leaves a trail of very real death in its wake. Perhaps the most perfect, tragic illustration of this obsession comes from the gilded cages of ancient China. The first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, so terrified of death, sent entire fleets searching for the mythical island of the Immortals. At home, his court physicians fed him a concoction they believed would grant him eternity, pills laced with pure mercury. He was poisoning himself in a desperate attempt to live forever, a perfect, fatal paradox. From Sumerian clay to the alchemist's crucible, from the explorer's map to the emperor's toxic cup, the ambition remains unchanged. All that has shifted is the language we use to dress it up. Today, we don't speak of magic plants or philosopher's stones. We speak of curing death, reverse aging, and uploading consciousness. We have cloaked the same primal fear, the same ancient hubris, in the sterile, respectable robes of science and code. We tell ourselves it's about progress, about evolution. But look closer and you will see the terrified face of Gilgamesh, still weeping for his friend, still willing to defy the world just for a few more moments of life.
For millennia, we chased this phantom, this elixir of life, convinced it was the ultimate prize. We saw mortality as a design flaw, a bug in the system to be patched and overcome. In all our frantic searching and desperate alchemy, we never stopped to ask the most important, most terrifying question. What if we actually succeeded? What happens to the human mind when its fundamental operating system, the knowledge that it will one day cease to exist, is summarily deleted? The answer is not a gentle ascent into godhood. It is a fall into three conceptual nightmares, a psychological unraveling that proves the cure is infinitely worse than the disease. The first nightmare is the evaporation of meaning. We humans are creatures of value, but we rarely stop to consider where value comes from. It comes from scarcity. A diamond is precious because it is rare. A masterpiece is treasured because there is only one. And a moment is beautiful, a choice is vital, a love is profound precisely because it is fleeting. Our entire architecture of meaning is built upon the foundation of endings. A deadline is what forces us to focus, to create, to act. It imbues our choices with weight, with consequence. Life is a story, and a story is defined by its ending. Without a final chapter, there is no plot. Only an endless, rambling sequence of events. Now, imagine an existence with no deadline at all, an infinite expanse of tomorrows. The motivation to act today dissolves into an endless sea of procrastination. Why write that novel this century when you have a billion more to go? Why tell someone you love them now when you have an eternity to get around to it? The urgency that fuels passion, the pressure that forges greatness, the bittersweet awareness that our time is short, which makes us hold each other so tightly, it all vanishes. What's left is a profound and unshakable apathy, a state of existential paralysis where the gravity of any single choice becomes zero. Every path can be taken, every mistake can be rectified, every opportunity will come again. In such a universe, nothing matters. It is the ultimate freedom and therefore the ultimate damnation, a featureless plane of infinite time where the human spirit, deprived of the friction of finitude, simply grinds to a halt. If that spiritual inertia doesn't claim you, the second nightmare will, the drowning of the self. The human mind is a marvel, but it is not infinite. Our capacity for memory, for emotion, for grief has limits. An immortal life is not a highlight reel of triumphs. It is an unbearable, ever-expanding archive of loss. It is not just watching your parents die, then your partner, then your children. It is watching your children's children's children die. It is watching everyone you have ever known or loved turn to dust again and again and again. Friends, lovers, rivals, they become a parade of ghosts marching through your memory. But it doesn't stop there. You would outlive cities, watching them crumble into ruins. You would outlive nations, seeing them rise as empires and collapse into forgotten footnotes. You would outlive languages, cultures, and eventually, perhaps, the human species itself. You would become a living fossil, a museum of grief, where every memory is a doorway to another tomb. How could a finite mind possibly bear such an infinite weight? The only defense mechanism would be to forget. To survive, the mind would be forced to perform a rolling lobotomy on itself, cauterizing old wounds by erasing the memories that contain them. But our identity is nothing more than the sum of our experiences. Who are you without the memory of your first love, your greatest failure, your deepest sorrow? To save your sanity, you would have to murder your past selves, shedding identities like a snake sheds its skin. You would become a stranger to yourself, a ghost adrift in your own endless timeline, perpetually erasing the very person you once were just to make room for the crushing weight of tomorrow's losses. And should you somehow navigate the twin horrors of apathy and grief, you arrive at the final, most insidious prison, the tedium of eternity. This was the argument of the philosopher Bernard Williams, who contended that an endless life would inevitably become a state of inescapable, soul-crushing boredom. He argued that what makes us who we are, what gives our life a unique character, are our categorical desires. These are the core projects, passions, and commitments that propel us through life. The desire to raise a family, to master an instrument, to build a company, to fight for a cause. These desires are what get us out of bed in the morning, but they are not infinite. Over a long enough timeline, you would exhaust them all. You would have every career, master every skill, read every book, travel to every corner of the galaxy. You would fall in and out of love 10,000 times with 10,000 different kinds of beings. You would see every possible configuration of art, science, and philosophy. And then what? Eventually, you arrive at a point where the universe holds no more surprises. Every conversation is a faint echo of one you have had before. Every beautiful landscape is a pale imitation of a billion others. This isn't the temporary boredom of a slow afternoon. This is a metaphysical boredom. It is the chilling realization that you have seen it all, done it all, and felt it all, and the tape of existence is now simply playing on a loop. The only escape would be to fundamentally change who you are, to adopt a new set of categorical desires. But then, the person who began this immortal journey no longer exists. You have been replaced. This is the ultimate paradox. The psychological structures that allow us to live a rich, meaningful, and coherent life are inextricably bound to the fact that we die. Our mortality is not a flaw. It is the scaffolding that gives our existence shape and purpose. To remove it is not to elevate us into gods. It is to dismantle the very essence of the human spirit.
This isn't a speculative future. This isn't a philosophical thought experiment. The nightmares of apathy, grief, and tedium are being actively ignored by the high priests of our modern age. Today, in the gleaming glass temples of Silicon Valley, a new breed of alchemist is hard at work, spending billions of dollars to tear down the very scaffolding of the human condition. They don't wear robes or whisper incantations over bubbling potions. They wear hoodies, speak in the language of disruption, and write the formulas for eternal life in lines of code. They are the God builders of our time, and they are deadly serious. This ancient quest for the elixir of life has found its new home in corporate research labs and venture capital funds. Google, the company that organized the world's information, has a subsidiary called Calico Labs, whose stated mission is to understand the biology that controls lifespan with the ultimate goal of enabling people to live longer, healthier lives. It's a beautifully sterile euphemism for what it truly is, a war on death, funded by one of the most powerful entities on Earth. Futurists like Ray Kurzweil, a director of engineering at that same company, act as the movement's prophets, predicting a near-future singularity. This is the moment they believe humans will merge seamlessly with artificial intelligence, shedding our frail biological shells to live on as digital gods in a computational heaven. They speak of solving the problem of death with the same casual confidence as if they were fixing a software bug, a final glitch in the human machine that needs to be patched and optimized. But this is not a neutral scientific endeavor. It is a political and ethical minefield, and in their rush to become gods, they refuse to ask the most crucial question: who will get to be one? When this technology arrives, it will not be distributed freely like a software update. It will be the most expensive, most exclusive, and most sought-after commodity in human history. We are not talking about a new gap between the rich and the poor. We are talking about a biological schism in the very definition of humanity. It would create a new class structure, a permanent caste system written not in law, but into the double helix of our DNA. On one side, a small elite of immortal gods, the tech billionaires and their chosen few who can afford to buy eternity. On the other, the disposable, mortal majority, the rest of us, left to age and die as humanity always has. It is the ultimate inequality, a world where the masters of the universe not only own your data and your labor, but the very concept of a future itself. The social consequences are staggering to contemplate. Imagine a world ruled by a permanent gerontocracy. The same handful of individuals, their ideas and biases forged in a bygone era, would remain in power forever. Art, culture, science, politics, all would stagnate, held in the unshakable grip of a permanent establishment that can never be replaced. Where is the room for revolution when the revolutionaries grow old and die, but the kings never do? Society would suffer from a terminal case of sclerosis, endlessly recycling the ideas of the eternally old. Think of the ecological strain. The Earth is a finite system, its resources balanced on a knife's edge. This balance depends on the cycle of generations, of life making way for new life. What happens to that system when a portion of its population simply refuses to leave? The burden of a species that never dies out, endlessly consuming, endlessly taking up space, would be catastrophic. The price of immortality for the few would be a ravaged, exhausted planet for the many who are still bound to its mortal coils. And perhaps most chilling is the psychological impact on those left behind. What would it be like to live your brief, flickering life in the shadow of an undying elite? To know that your entire existence, with all its loves and losses, its triumphs and tragedies, is nothing more than a fleeting afternoon to your immortal landlord or employer. It would breed a new kind of existential despair, a learned helplessness on a species-wide scale. It would confirm the oldest fear of the powerless, that they are, in fact, insignificant. The quest to build a god would inevitably create a devil, and that devil is a society more stratified, more unjust, and more hopeless than anything humanity has ever conceived.
So we are left standing at a crossroads. Down one path lies the cold, sterile promise of forever, a digital eternity bought by the few, built on the rejection of our own nature. But what if we have been staring so intently at that distant, artificial horizon that we have failed to see the profound beauty already surrounding us? What if the entire project to solve death is based on a tragic misreading of the human condition? What if our mortality isn't a bug to be fixed, but the very feature that makes our existence precious? There is a concept in Japanese culture, mono no aware. It is a gentle, wistful sadness for the transience of all things. It is the feeling you get when you see the cherry blossoms in full, glorious bloom, knowing that in a week the wind will carry them away. Their beauty is not diminished by their brevity, it is created by it. The bloom is beautiful because it is fleeting. This is the truth we have forgotten in our quest for permanence. Our finitude is what gives life its texture, its urgency, its heartbreaking beauty. It is the undeniable fact of the ending that forces us to begin. The ticking clock is what fuels the artist to paint, the scientist to discover, and the lover to cherish a moment of shared silence. The knowledge that our time with others is limited is precisely what makes empathy and compassion possible, forging a profound bond between beings who share the same fragile, ephemeral condition. We strive to build legacies, to tell stories, and to love fiercely, not in spite of our mortality, but because of it. It is the canvas upon which all meaning is painted. The dream of Silicon Valley, the dream of uploading our minds and escaping the body, is a dream of escaping the very things that make us human: vulnerability, change, and loss. Perhaps the greatest human project is not to invest billions in escaping our fate, but to learn how to live more fully within the time we are given. To embrace our mortality, not as a curse, but as a silent reminder to be present, to be kind, and to pay attention. The goal was never to live forever. The goal was to live, to truly live, even for a moment, in this fleeting, beautiful, and profoundly meaningful world.